You know, when we think of great naval empires, names like the British, the Spanish, or the Portuguese, they usually come to mind first, right? But what if I told you that 1,000 years ago, a South Indian dynasty absolutely commanded the seas of Asia? We're talking about projecting power in a way the world wouldn't see again for centuries. So let's get into the story of this forgotten superpower and figure out how they turned the Indian Ocean into their own personal lake.
All right, so our guide for this entire deep dive is the work of historian Herman Kolke. He's the one who really pieced together this incredible story from all sorts of sources. Ancient inscriptions, old court records, you name it. It's thanks to his work that we can understand this maritime superpower through the actual evidence they left behind.
And that brings us to the central mystery, the big question really. Think about it. It's the year 1025. You have no GPS, no modern navigation. So how on earth did a South Indian empire launch a massive fleet across 1,500 miles of open ocean to invade another major power? Just think about that for a second. That single question is what we're here to unpack.
Okay, so first up, the Chola's Ocean Empire. We're talking about an absolutely unprecedented feat.
And look, this isn't some second-hand account we're reading. These are the Chola's own words, literally carved into the stone of the Great Temple at Thanjavur. It's a raw, in-your-face declaration of victory from the emperor himself, Rajendra I. He's basically boasting about his campaign against the Srivijayan Empire, claiming he captured their king, their war elephants, and of course, the huge treasure they'd piled up.
So, who was this target, Srivijaya? Well, they weren't just some minor kingdom, no way. They were basically the gatekeepers of all Asian trade. They controlled the Straits of Malacca. That's the super important sea highway connecting India and the Middle East to China. To put it simply, if you wanted to move goods and get rich, you had to go through them, and you had to pay their toll.
Okay, so why invade? An attack on this scale needs a seriously big motive, right? Why would you risk everything to attack another huge power thousands of miles from home? Was this just about conquest? Or was there something bigger at play here? Well, as you can probably guess, historians don't really have one simple answer. There are a few big theories. Maybe it was just a classic plunder raid, a smash and grab for treasure and glory. Or maybe it was about knocking out a commercial rival. Some even think it was a massive geopolitical power play to control the sea lanes to China and basically declare the Bay of Bengal a Chola lake. But honestly, the most likely answer is that it was probably a mix of all these things.
And this whole debate really boils down to two main ideas. On one side, you've got historian G.W. Spencer. He argues for what he calls the politics of plunder. The idea is that these Chola kings were warriors, and they needed big, successful raids full of treasure to look powerful and legitimate. But on the other hand, you have Tanzin Sen, who suggests a much more strategic, economic motive. He thinks that Cholas wanted to break Srivijaya's monopoly to get direct, unfiltered access to the incredibly wealthy markets of Song China.
All right, moving on to how they did it. Masters of the Eastern Seas. So the why is complicated. It's debated. But that still leaves us with the how. How did the Cholas even get the naval power to pull something like this off? Because this was not a random act. This was the result of a very deliberate, very systematic rise to power. And if you look at the timeline, this 1025 invasion doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It all starts decades earlier with Rajendra's father, Rajaraja I. He's the one who starts the naval campaigns, conquering the Maldives, a super strategic spot in the Indian Ocean. Then, his son, Rajendra, takes over, inherits this naval focus, and just takes it to a whole new level. And the big climax? The Srivijaya campaign. And check this out, you can see the end goal pretty clearly. Decades later, a massive Chola trading group of 72 merchants shows up in China. So the military campaign, it had a very clear economic payoff.
What all this shows is a pretty brilliant and methodical grand strategy. Look at the steps. Step 1. Secure your own backyard. They lock down the coastlines of southern India and Sri Lanka. Step 2. Project your power. They establish naval supremacy across the entire Bay of Bengal, basically making it their home turf. And then, Step 3. The masterstroke. A direct assault on those key maritime choke points, the Straits of Malacca and Sunda. By doing that, they effectively took over the whole trade network. It's genius, really.
All right, let's talk legacy. A legacy across Asia. Because an invasion of this size wasn't just some historical footnote. It sent shockwaves across the entire region and left a lasting Chola footprint all over Southeast Asia. A footprint we can actually still trace today.
And the evidence of this influence is literally scattered all over the map. You find Tamil inscriptions in Sumatra,
left behind by their merchant guilds. We know from records they captured strategic ports on the Malayan Peninsula. Then you look at Chinese court records, and bam, there are the Chola embassies, logged for diplomatic and trade missions. They even had friendly ties with other big players like the Khmer Empire in Cambodia. This was a truly international network they were running.
And this right here, this reveals the real engine behind their empire. The Chola Navy wasn't just for conquering stuff. It was a tool of economic policy. Think of it like a massive security force for these powerful Tamil merchant guilds, like the Nanda Desi. The Navy made sure they could operate safely across this huge maritime space. See how that works? Military power and commercial prosperity. They went hand in hand.
So what's the big takeaway here? We've looked at the what, the why, and the how. But what does it all mean? Why should this 1,000-year-old story about a forgotten maritime empire matter to us today?
Well, when you really step back and look at it, this is so much more than a story of ships and swords. The Chola Empire built this deeply interconnected system that looks, well, it looks remarkably modern. They just got the link between a strong military, smart diplomacy, and a booming economy. What we're really looking at here is an early, powerful wave of globalization. And it wasn't centered in Europe. It was centered right in the Indian Ocean.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty powerful question to think about. What can this 1,000-year-old story of a forgotten maritime empire teach us about the relationship between trade and conflict on the world's oceans today? Because the Cholas proved that controlling sea lanes means you control trade, and that commercial competition can turn into military conflict fast. 1,000 years later, as new powers compete over these very same oceans, their story starts to feel less like ancient history and a lot more like a warning, or maybe even a blueprint.